Hey, welcome back to another episode of Parker's Pensées. I'm your host, Parker Settecase, and this is a podcast where we discuss all the deepest ideas in philosophy, theology, nature, and life. I love thinking about cool stuff, so come think with me. This episode is very, very special. I have a returning guest, Dr. Jacob Alley. We're going to be talking about Commonplace books. So I may change up the logo here. I don't know where this is going to go. If it's going to be over here on ParkNotes or on Parker's Pensées, you guys keep me guessing because the audiences are so different, even though they shouldn't be. And you guys are all listening to me talk about crap, whatever. So I'm going to put it somewhere. But Jacob Alley is, he runs the Study the Great Books Substack, and it's fantastic. He's got a doctorate in, what's it called? The humanities, but it's a great books doctorate. It's great. So if you want to learn about great books and the great ideas, this is the guy to do it. Check out his stuff. You can find the link in the description. He is coming out with a Study the Great Books Commonplace book. That's why we're talking about Commonplace books. So I'm excited for that. Check the link for the descriptions and come follow me on Substack as well, Parker's Ponderings, or my science fiction and fantasy stuff, Sages, Mages, and Wisdom Machines. As always, if you guys like this podcast, please consider supporting me on Patreon or Substack or right here on YouTube for YouTube members. All that good stuff. There's lots of ways I have commodified myself and everything I'm interested in at all. So thanks for that. I'm going to bring in Dr. Jacob Alley, and we're going to talk about Commonplace books. Let's do it. Dude, thanks so much for coming back on the pod here.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Yeah, this is awesome. So last time we talked about what I can't think of the book now. It's green. It's right over there on my thing. Why can't I
I'm
think
trying
of
to
it?
remember what it was too. It's been too long, man. I don't know.
Yeah, dang it. Okay, it's the one with the bugs and
Oh yeah, Starship Troopers. That's
Starship
right.
Troopers. I don't know why I couldn't. I just went through Armor. Armor's a book by John Stakely, and it's in the same vein
Yes,
as
yes.
that.
I've
So
heard of it. I haven't read it.
oh,
But
it's so good. I actually think it's a little bit better.
interesting.
But that is like a subgenre in science fiction now. It's like wear a suit of armor, fight bugs, and then we'll talk about a different philosophical theme in the meantime. And I
Yeah.
actually really like that. So today we're going to be talking about commonplace books. Before we jump in on that, I want to talk a little bit about the great books, whatever those may be. I mean, you're an expert in this, dude. You got your PhD in it. What are the great books?
So the great books. These are pieces of literature, history that are basically recommended to us by the ages. And so what we mean by that is they have survived, right? And so in some cases, we're talking about books that are thousands of years old, sometimes hundreds of years old. But certainly, typically, we would say the great books are at least, 100 or so or more years old typically is kind of the cutoff. And so anything closer than that, people kind of debate about as far as like, well, will this be, and sometimes I'm willing to make more confident predictions than others, like I think Lord of the Rings is a great book,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But so why is it a great book though? Beyond that, when you just think about it, you say, okay, why, of all the things that have been written, why does this still exist? Especially when you think about the past and how, these books had to literally be hand copied, for thousands of years, hundreds and thousands of years. And that's a lot of work, right? And so we know for fact, because books mention other books, how many, or we have at least an idea of how many books just fell out of existence, right? So why is it that Homer's Iliad and Odyssey? Why is it that Aeschylus's plays? Why is it that the writings of Plato and Aristotle and all the way, to more closer to our time, like Shakespeare, but it's been a while still, but Shakespeare keeps getting handed down too, and why is that? And it's because every generation that has read these books has said to themselves, my kids have to read this. My grandkids have to read this. And there's something in these books that is of such a universal human interest that they never lose their value. They never lose their impact upon the reader, right? And so when we're reading something from ancient Greece or Rome, or something that was originally in the conical Akkadian script, or something that was maybe scribbled on the walls or chiseled on the walls of a pyramid somewhere, or I mean, like, just all these different things, right?
Yeah.
But they have been preserved because men and women read them, and even though they may be ancient and very foreign, they say, I see myself in this. I
Mm.
see something that I've thought about. I've wondered about the same thing, or I've wrestled with this idea of what it means to belong somewhere, or what a friendship really is, or what's worth dying for, or what my purpose in life is, or who the gods or God is, and all these different kinds of things that, like,
Yeah.
listen, if you're not interested in those topics today, you're not very human,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
and so that's why they're great books, is because they hit on these universal themes. They're beautifully, powerfully written, and they have just generation after generation made the same impact, and made people like you and me go, God, my kids got to read this
Yeah.
too. So
That's a really good criteria, is thinking about, do I want my kid to read this? Yes, they must. So that's a great book. That's really fascinating. Do you think, can something be a great book if it doesn't touch on some of the great ideas?
um, I'd be kind of hard pressed to think of an example. I mean, the closest thing that comes to my mind towards something like that would be some comedy type
Okay.
work, maybe.
Sure.
But even then, like, I'd be kind of like, I think it's, you're hard pressed to have a book of any kind of substance, even if it is like just humorous substance,
Yeah.
that doesn't in some way impact these ideas. But I think of, like, PG Woodhouse would be a good example,
Mm.
who is just outrageously hilarious and very witty. And he, even in his comedy, and he's got a, this is the early 1900s. He's got a British aristocrat, 20-something-year-old, who is completely immature and just spends all his money and passions on himself. And he's got his butler Jeeves, who constantly pulls him out of trouble.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
and they're hysterical stories. And yet, even in those funny comical books, he ends up referring to things, like he ends up referring to biblical stories. He ends up referring to some episode in history, which he usually relays not quite right, which is part of the humor. Like, he's
Yeah.
mixing stories. And anyway, so yeah, I don't know, that's an interesting question. But I think, I don't know, I guess in my mind, I think the survival value depends on it having some sort of connection
Yeah.
to the great ideas still.
I think that's, I ask because I'm writing my own stuff right now, and I write philosophical science fiction and theological fantasy, basically, and it's always centered around a specific idea that I'm trying to convey,
Hmm.
and that's the way I like to do it. And I think about some other authors, and I'm like, man, this is a really good story, but what'd you leave me with? And some people are really good at writing. I think about thrillers actually too. A thriller will suck you in, and you're like, cool, I got to the end. Great. And now that's over. And I don't know if I'll read that again, because the whole
Yeah.
point of reading it was the shock value, but it didn't deal with great ideas, didn't make me ponder, didn't make me put it down and chew on it. It's not really gonna haunt me about any consequences, or
Yeah.
what this did or that. It was a cheap thrill, kind of. That's kind of how I think about it. And so it's just making me think, man, if you want to have that lasting staying power, you need to put at least one good idea in there.
I agree with that. I mean, I think, to take this into the movie realm a little bit, horror in general. I mean, I'm not a fan of the horror genre. I think a lot of the horror genre is just a mess.
Yeah.
It's unredeemable stuff. And yet there's certainly examples, well, both in literature and in movies, that we could point to that make it clear that horror can be done in a way that is actually helpful.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, the movie Devil by M. Night Shyamalan. I don't know if you've ever seen that
No,
one.
I
It's one
haven't.
of his lesser known ones, kind of, right? Um, takes The whole thing takes place like in an elevator that's broken down,
Mm,
and I won't ruin the whole story because you should just watch this, right? But it has an extremely powerful redemptive arc in the
mm,
story. And so it's about redemption. Like that's the idea, right?
Mm.
And it's scary. Like it's kind of horrifying, and it's it's everything. It's truly a horror movie, and yet it is so redeemable
Mm.
because of what he's actually doing, in the plot of that story. So I think that's a good case to that, and I think also like Dracula, the original Bram Stoker's Dracula,
Mm.
is I definitely think it's a great book,
Mm.
and it's if you want to narrow in on one great idea, it's fortitude, and so you have Dracula, who is the incarnation of evil in the world,
Mhm.
right? I mean, that's what he is, and it's horrifying. Anybody who thinks Dracula is not scary isn't reading it right.
Mhm.
I think they haven't like woke up their imagination enough.
Yeah.
You have to place yourself like with Jonathan Harker, locked in this castle, and thinking this is it. There's no way out, and I'm going to be a feast for some vampiruses soon. And
Mm.
anyway, it's just terrifying. But that's a story about the plans of evil incarnate to conquer the world, and a small band of friends who risk everything to stop
Mm.
him.
Hmm.
It's so good. It's
That's
so
really good.
good. Yeah. So you ever
That's
watch?
a
Of course,
theme. I mean, that's Stranger Things, right? That's like every it's kind of like the Goonies, but it's even smaller. That's a smaller
yeah, yeah,
version.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's like, yeah, Band of Friends, Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
that's a good theme. That's huge. Also, the reason we're talking about great books is because you're running this Substack, Study the Great Books, which is awesome, and you're coming out with this new Commonplace book. And in there, you talk about the great ideas as like tags or commonplaces
Mhm.
to categorize your quotes. Can you tell us a little bit about the great ideas? Maybe what makes them great, and then what are these things? What are maybe some examples?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the great ideas, like so I guess a way to kind of think about them is universal themes that appear again and again and again in literature, because again it has this kind of far-reaching human interest, or it's maybe like a very strong um, I don't know if plot device is the right word, but something that just kind of to make a good story, you end up seeing these kind of things again and again, like we were just talking about with the band of friends. So
Yeah.
like friendship is a great idea, and then how it can fit into a story. So I've got a long list of these, but just to kind of let's see, throw out a few. Adoption is a great idea, right? And so of course you can say, well, you can take that really woodenly and literally, and like a person like adopting a child. So maybe you're going to think of one of Dickens' novels where young little street urchin actually gets adopted, and that's fine. Like that would be still in the great idea, but it can also be more metaphorical
Hmm.
than that, right? It can be the case where someone has always felt displaced, but is welcomed into a family. So again, like Harry Potter's a fantastic example of
Yeah.
that. He's not officially adopted by the Weasleys, but he basically is, right?
Mhm.
So you see the theme of adoption and family and belonging there, and things like that. So that's one idea. You may just rattle off some more, or do you want to
No,
talk about
I mean,
anything?
these are done well and poorly, right? So, a
Mhm.
bad case of adoption would be Rey Skywalker calling herself, Rey from Star Wars, and the last three calling herself
Self-adoption.
Skywalker. It's like a terrible job. Yeah, you took a great idea and you botched it. So good job. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, well,
So
another one.
some
Okay, so
okay,
talking about the great ideas, actually, I'm a big Mortimer Adler guy. We talked about that a little bit before.
yeah.
I got the great works back here, and the
I love that you have a deer stalker in front of
yeah, that's I wouldn't.
you gotta
It's a
study
real
those
one.
great
My
books.
wife
Yeah.
bought that and was really upset at me for wanting that, but I got it. Um, I I think my favorite great book in that series is actually the Centopicon, because Mortimer Adler is going through the Centopicon. He's drawing out all the great ideas. It's kind of a compendium slash commonplace book of the great ideas present in the great works of the Western world. It's my favorite. I love it. I read it all the time. Um, I saw on your list you had eucatastrophe as one of the great ideas. And I don't know if Adler brought that in because that seems like something that came from Tolkien's
Yeah,
on fairy stories. It's one of my
yeah.
favorite ideas of all time. So maybe you could talk about eucatastrophe, and then also how are you making this list? Are you taking Adler's and you're adding to it or editing it? Did you remove any? Tell us about that process.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Eucatastrophe, right? It comes from a combination of two different Greek terms, and it basically means a good turn in the story. Okay. So we're used to thinking of catastrophe as a negative, right? Like, so we use that word as negative all the time, but it literally, in its root, it just means like things like have turned, right? So typically in a catastrophe in our life, we go from things are well, and then suddenly, the car is on fire and the tree fell on your house, or something like, like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is terrible. What am I going to do? But a catastrophe, that prefix, is all the difference. Is this is where things go completely the right direction,
Mhm.
right? And usually in the moment of despair, right?
Mhm.
And yet you mentioned Tolkien. Tolkien is the one who kind of coined this phrase, as far as I know.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that this idea isn't like all throughout the history of literature, and actually just happens in history, and so there's a eucatastrophe in history would be when George Washington and his men are pinned down against the river, and it's nighttime, and the next morning they are almost certainly to be slaughtered and defeated by the British, because they're completely surrounded with their back against the water, right? And they pray, and what happens is a huge fog rolls in
Mm.
and completely covers them from sight, and they're able to escape across the river, unseen, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a eucatastrophe in history, right?
Mm.
And then, like, in, of course, Lord of the Rings, right? It's got to give an example from Tolkien, since he is the guy who made the term.
Yeah.
You think of Helm's Deep, you think of the battle at Helm's Deep, and you think of, like, they're in the keep, like they have been pushed back all the way they can go against this orc army, and but the dawn of day comes and Gandalf shows up,
Yeah.
right? And the whole battle turns away. They were just looking at absolute defeat, and now they have absolute victory, right?
Mhm.
So just things like that.
Yeah. The most famous one would be like Christ on the cross. And
Of
imagine
course.
being a disciple of Christ and being like, everything sucks, everything is terrible. Our leader is dead. Jesus is
We're
dead.
probably dead next.
Right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Afraid of little girls asking you if you know Jesus, and then boom, he's back, and you're like, oh, that changes everything. Like the worst evil brought about the greatest good. And
Yeah.
that, I mean, that is what Tolkien talks about in the
One
appendix, or
fun
whatever. To that.
thing
Yeah.
that some people, I think honestly, initially this was a confusion among certain people using the term eucatastrophe,
Hmm.
kind of a happy little confusion, right? Because I think some people were throwing the idea of Eucharist
Hmm.
into this, like Eucharist and
Yeah.
catastrophe. And
Yeah.
now that was not Tolkien's intent, but I think it's actually an interesting idea. So some people have talked about this as the ability to be able to give thanks for something that was extremely hard you went through, because it
Huh.
brought you to something better. And
Yeah.
I like that, like that wasn't Tolkien's idea, but I think that's kind of a beautiful notion, and you can definitely see that as well
Yeah.
in many stories.
That's fascinating. I never heard that before. It makes sense if you didn't know that he's smashing you and catastrophe
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
And then yeah, it is a happy coincidence. It's a you catastrophe in itself, maybe. No, but
That's
that
right.
is really fascinating. So when it comes to messing with the great ideas, adding the list, editing it, I feel you feel more freedom. You also have a PhD in this stuff, so I feel like you have more freedom. I'd be like, no, I don't know. I can't edit Adler. How could I change Adler? Um,
Yeah.
have you added a few? Have you added like are you just going Adler's list plus you catastrophe, or what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, like I've been kind of free with it, just to be honest, and
Sure.
I would encourage others to be relatively free with it, and let your limiting factor be, like, you just have to be able to come up with a word or a term that captures an idea, and you have to be able to demonstrate that that idea is kind of a lot of places in literature and history. Like it's
Yeah.
just, you can really, and so I think sometimes different people with lists are getting at the same thing and using different terms, and that's totally okay.
Mhm.
But what our goal in developing any kind of list like this is to help readers see these themes, to see that they are indeed everywhere. And I like to add, so I kind of say the great ideas and then also virtues and vices,
Yeah.
which in themselves can be kind of great ideas, but I kind of make that distinction because we want to, like, justice, right? Justice is a great idea, but it's one of the cardinal virtues,
Mm.
temperance and fortitude and faith and hope and love. Like we want to be looking for these things because we see incredible examples of them in history and literature. Brave men doing what's right in the most difficult times, and we see incredible faith in the midst of darkness, and all these kind of things, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that's a good thing to put in the list because especially as a classical Christian educator, I am convinced that a big part of what we're doing is not just filling up heads with information, but
Yeah.
is forming hearts to love what is true and good and beautiful. And so we want to see great examples of virtue that are worth imitating.
Mm.
And I also would like to point out vices too. So like we talk about using kind of the Aristotelian mean, that virtue is a mean between two vices. And so we've kind of given names to the vices as well. And so we say, okay, so like if we're reading Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, like it's the best book you could possibly read to talk about temperance. Like it's just so fantastic,
Mm.
because you have one daughter who works so hard to control her passions and her emotions, and then you have her mom and sister who are completely the opposite, right?
Mm.
And you got all these different characters in the story that are on one side or the other of the idea of temperance. Anyway, it's great. And so sometimes we learn just as much by the negative examples, right,
Yeah.
as we do the positive ones.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Screw tape letters, right? It's
Yeah.
like that was a fantastic example of that. Temperance itself is like a almost lost idea, unfortunately.
We need to
Um,
revive it.
Big time, big time.
Yeah.
And I think everyone always goes with that example too. And for me, growing up wrestling and being a bro, intentionally trying to be a bro, I'm like, I don't want to read that book. I understand that it's a great book. I don't want it. So
Yeah. I'm a
having
huge Jane Austen fan. Real men read Jane Austen.
yeah, help me. Well, dude, help me out really quick. Give me why Jane Austen doesn't seem like the kind of person I want to read.
Yep. All right.
If someone wrote it from the point of view of a boxer or something like that, that would lure me in and trick me. Help me out with Jane. Like, why should I read her?
This is something I say to people that may sound a little shocking at first, right? But I think that Jane Austen is kind of like The Office.
Okay.
All right. And so in The Office, if you've watched that show, you have all of these extreme personality types in The Office, right? And
Mhm.
as you watch the show, you're laughing your face off partly because you're thinking to yourself, I know that guy. Like I've
Mm,
seen that guy. Like I've worked with him
yeah.
too. I mean,
Yeah.
or they're caricatures, of course,
Mhm.
but you just like realize, yeah, I know somebody who just has that kind of anger issue, like Andy, who's like punching the wall,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's stuff like that. And so Jane Austen is an absolute master of character study.
Okay.
So when you're reading her books, and she has this little microcosm. It's really actually fascinating because in the time that she's operating, like and writing these stories about the upper class in England, in the late 1700s and things like that. Um, you don't know what else is going on in the world at all. I mean, like she's like there's actually like I kind of think it overlaps. I have to double check, but I kind of think it overlaps some of the Napoleonic War
Oh,
stuff.
nice. Okay.
But that's
Yeah.
just like not really in view, like
Sure.
anyway. So he kind of has this little microcosm, but in that microcosm, you are seeing incredible examples of virtue and vice. You're seeing
Mm,
incredible examples, and she just has a way of understanding human nature and character, and then like making that come to life in different people. And so, in Pride and Prejudice with Mr. Collins, you're like, that is so ridiculous.
Hmm.
But I kind of know somebody who's so servile like that towards other people,
Mhm.
or if you're reading Sense and Sensibility or no, Emma, probably one of my favorite characters in literature almost anywhere is in Emma. And it's Mr. Knightley, Mr. George Knightley. And
Hmm.
he is in every way the man that I want to be.
Hmm.
He just is. He's got himself together. He's temperate, right? He's very reasonable and thoughtful. He's forthright. He speaks his mind when it's appropriate to do so. He's willing to risk, kind of ire at times, to do what's right and say what's right. So there's just all these examples of people like that who are either worth emulating or worth scorning, kind of. And it's just brilliant. She's a brilliant storyteller. A lot of people actually say that Emma, in its own way, it's a romance, right? But Emma is in some ways a mystery novel and the first of its sort, in a sense, because there's all kinds of things going on. You're like trying to figure out who did what and what's happening here. And I think that's kind of an interesting take. But, I think really men need to read this because, the same reason that you would read a lot of other great literature. It interacts with these universal ideas and themes, but it gives us great examples of things that we should want to imitate and things we should want to avoid. And at the same time, like, she's just a master storyteller, and it's so, like, sometimes guys maybe just have to get over the genre of what they think they're looking at and realize, like, you can learn so much from Jane Austen, right? I mean, she knows how to put together a story. And they're very well done. And it's in this really limited area, which is almost interesting in itself, right? Like, the whole world fades away. It's just got this little microcosm of, so, like, a lot of people, like, read Jane Austen and get into Jane Austen, and they're like, that's what England was like in the 1700s. It's like, that's what, like, this much of England was like in the 1700s,
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know that, right? It's just this whole world that she's created, and it's almost like the Jane Austen verse,
That's good. No, that's really helpful. I know it. I know that I should read her, but that was really helpful for putting her on my list. Just do you have a study the great books companion thing to any of her works?
Not yet. We are making some study guides. We'll have probably this next year. We'll have one out on Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice as well.
Nice.
So we're working that direction.
Nice. That'll be great. Yeah, I can't wait to check those ones out. So we talked about the great ideas partially because they're in this new Commonplace book guide that you're coming out with. Is it already out?
It is shipped today to come to me. So
Nice.
we're trying to get our new website set up, and so, Lord willing, in about 2 weeks or so, the website will be live, and we'll be able to take sales and things like that. So.
Awesome, fantastic. Yeah, it looks really cool. So the great ideas are some examples of commonplaces or tags or categories that you can use in your commonplace book. For those who are unfamiliar with the term, can you help us out? What is a commonplace book?
Yeah, I think the term commonplace book is a little elastic. I think people have used this in different ways, right? And that's great. Like, there's nothing in the world wrong with that. So in one sense, Parker's Pensées, right? You're riffing off of Pascal, and a lot of people would say Pascal's Pensées was essentially his commonplace book, right? Which was just a notebook where he, like, gathered his thoughts and put down random things that popped into his head and so on and so forth. And so that's one way to just keep a commonplace book. It's just like kind of like a journal, only not like telling your day, but just like anytime a thought occurs to you that seems worthy of preservation, you're putting it in there and things like that. The kind of commonplace journal that we're doing here is a historical literary kind of commonplace where we're taking extractions from great books. When we're reading a text, we're like, that is such an excellent quote, right? And again, it exemplifies a great idea, a virtue, or advice. And you're saying, I want to write that down so that I can find it again, so that I can share it with others, so that it might become part of the inspiration for some essay I want to write, or it might, if I'm doing some sort of essay or even longer work, dissertation, I'm going to be interacting with these ideas, and so I want to make sure I can easily find them again. So you would say, okay, I'm reading, Homer right now, and I see a good example of hope or something like that. And so I'm going to write down the quote in my journal, and I'm going to write, this came from Homer's Iliad in, book 3 or whatever it was. And so that's what a commonplace journal is. It's just simply like taking these extracts, taking these quotes and putting them in a journal, so that you can kind of come back and find them later.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, I've been doing this for years, and I've been, again, in the classical Christian education movement for years. And lots of schools like ours encourage students to keep these journals. And that's great. It's just a fantastic habit. And however you go about it, like I'm not knocking anybody's approach. Everybody has kind of a different approach. But the thing that's occurred to me, kind of the late last year, I guess, I started thinking about this. It's how difficult they are to use, really. Like, so once you've got them, like you've got these books full of quotes kind of randomly as you've been reading, and so you're like, okay, I know somewhere like in this, 200 to 300 pages is that quote that I want, and so you're just like flipping and trying to find it. And that can be really difficult to find the thing or even remind you of it. And so what we've done is we've developed a new kind of commonplace book that's got a tagging system that will allow you to more easily find what you want when you want it. It's very simple. There's not a brainiac concept. So the journal opens and it has an explanation of the process, and it has a list of great ideas with kind of short definitions for all the great ideas, to kind of point you in a direction, So like, one of the reasons that I think that's important too, having again done this for a long time with students, if you don't kind of give some sort of criteria or suggest like these are things to look for, what you end up is having a bunch of 8th grade boys go, Bomber's fat. That's my commonplace, like, and it's like, okay, I mean, I get it. You want to write that in there, like you suit yourself, right? But let's also look for, something a little substantive, And so, so using the great ideas and the virtues and the vices as a way of saying, these are the things I'm looking for intentionally while I'm reading. And so when you find a good example, either an example of that or somebody directly addressing the concept, if it's a more philosophical treatise or something like that, underline it, write that great idea in the margin of your book, right? Then take that and excerpt and put it into your commonplace journal. Just like I said, you just copy the quote, put where you got it from. In our new commonplace book that we have developed, there's now an index in the back of the journal. And it has listed all of the great ideas, virtues, and vices once again, next to some blank lines. And you just simply write the page number next to the great idea, virtue, or vice. And that way, so like over time, you fill up this journal and you're like, oh, I want to look into the great idea of redemption. Where have I seen redemption in all of these books I've read? Well, you flip to the back of the journal, find redemption, right? And you see, okay, page 3, 37, 42, 69. Like these are all pages that have a quote that relates to the topic of redemption, right? And it just becomes accessible suddenly, rather than just surfing forever trying to find that thing again. So,
I love it. I love this idea. There's so many things that you touched on. I'm the accidental notebook czar on YouTube because I talked about commonplace books and everyone, backed me into a corner and I like studied them forever. So I will criticize people. I will bag on someone's approach for you because there's a lot of different categories. And the problem, people have forgot our history and we don't know how our thinkers used to think. And now people are like, well, just use this digital thing for all your stuff. You can search it. It's like, well, if you're typing it out, it's not hitting the same connections that you would writing by hand. That's one thing. But secondly, efficiency is not your friend. Like you want repetition. You do need to repeatedly write things down to get it into your brain. And then when you're one of the best things about a physical commonplace book is when you're flipping through it, even if you have a great index and you're flipping through, you're still going to see other quotations that you collected. And those are going to help you remember them and ruminate on them, which is so much better than scrolling on Instagram. Like scroll through your own Commonplace book and remember what you wanted to. Why did that quote stick out to you? Why was it so important that I wrote it down in my book? And it's like, dude, do that. Please do that. Please write those down. Um, People who do like the Pascal thing that you're talking about. I think a lot of people may not know that Pascal he was trying to write a Christian apologetics book, and he just
Mhm.
died before he could. And it turned out to be it turned out for our benefit, right, in the Lord's providence,
Yeah. Right.
because we have this amazing work of philosophical aphorisms. And it's like, dude,
Mhm.
you should do that also. You should
Yeah.
also do that, but it's a book of aphorisms. I'm writing a chapter on this in my book. That's a style of philosophy that has gone now, but we can take it back by just writing our own aphorism. Keep your own notebook of aphorisms, but make it separate than your Commonplace book. No problem. Get me all fired up here, man. This is
Yeah.
so
Good.
cool. I love it. And I'm so glad that you're doing this. Philosophers used to do this. I mean, it comes the word commonplaces comes from Aristotle. He was trying to keep
Mhm.
a compendium of logical arguments, and then the Roman rhetoricians expanded that. So philosophers, rhetoricians, pastors, like everyone's keeping these, and then they kind of fell out of fashion. There's reasons for that, but I'm wondering about you personally. How'd you discover the Commonplace book? To me, folks in the humanities have been holding down the fort, and all the philosophers have totally abandoned it, and they're like,
Hmm.
"What is a Commonplace book?" How did you did you discover it through your studies, or were you doing this on your own on accident, and then later found out it was a Commonplace book? Or yeah, what's your history of discovery here?
Yeah, I mean, I just God's providential grace, I guess, because I got into classical Christian education and became a teacher and had, only partial ideas about how great all of this stuff was,
Mhm.
and I've just as I have been teaching over the last little over a decade now in classical schools. I've learned so much, and I've found so many other great habits and things to do.
Mm.
This is just one that along the way. I don't honestly remember who recommended it to me, or but yeah, it's something that I saw other people doing. I thought that's good. Like that's a good
Wow.
thing to do, and so I joined the train and have been militating on it, or I don't know if that's not the right word. Ruminating on it, something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
for a long time. And but I've been thinking about like how can I make this, not that everything's value is its utility or
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
like that, but nonetheless, it, since a great way for students in particular to use a commonplace book is as fodder and fuel for their rhetoric and for their
Yeah.
composition and things like that, the ability to more quickly access it and find the kind of things you're looking for, the better. But I absolutely agree with you too that part of it is just the re-roaming through the book again and seeing, oh yeah, I remember that,
Yeah.
and just the juices get flowing and things like that. And you can still do that even with this tag index. You
Of
can say,
course.
good tag.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna flip through this thing and see what inspires me to write about today or whatever. So
I think I think you have to organize it in some way. Otherwise, it's not even really that fun of a hobby actually, because
yeah.
you wrote it down and it's gone. And I find a lot of people do that on the YouTube comments and stuff, and people have different vague notions of a commonplace book is just a notebook for a bunch of different random stuff. And like, there's a word for that. It's called a zibaldone. People used to keep those things, and they were uncategorized commonplace books that Italians, in the Renaissance would share with each other. That's cool. That's a different style as well. So don't feel bad about that. Just it's cool to learn the history of it and see how did people used to keep these. Oh, okay, I'm doing something like that. If I wanted to have a more focused commonplace book, why would I do that? Because it's better for other things.
Yeah.
It's better for
Yeah.
research. It's better if you're a preacher and you don't have a commonplace book. Come on, what are you doing?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
write down why you're studying, write that stuff down and use that in your sermons.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
I I'm like you. I want to systematize it in a way that's better than like John Locke's, because good luck doing what John Locke did. But I came up with 4 differentia because I have to use Latin words to sound smart and it's fun. But I actually think it's helpful. So I have one genus. It's a commonplace book. There's 4 differentia: scope, purpose, audience and places. So like a scope would be, is it a general commonplace or a specific? And I think this is really helpful for people. Yours sounds like it's more of a general commonplace book. Like whatever you're reading, and you find this idea, put that in this commonplace book. And then you have good stuff from all different genres all over the place. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And good, like if you don't tag that, you will never find your stuff, because you have Jane Austen, if you ever read her, and then you
Netflix
have,
Ozark, yeah.
yeah, right. Like it's just like you need to find a way to go back and find your stuff, because you're going to be writing papers, because you're going to be writing Facebook posts, whatever the case. Everything's better with a quote. So
Yep.
organize them. Then you can also have like a topic specific one. I keep a pocket proverbs commonplace book, which is just wise sayings that I find, and I pull them from everywhere, from movies, but from books. And I don't categorize that because they're just proverbs and aphorisms, and
Right.
the tag would be as long as the entry itself. And so that I just pull out when I'm tempted to scroll my phone, and I read through that instead. Now I'm getting wisdom in my head. So you can having the determining the scope of your commonplace book will be super helpful for knowing what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
So I love
that makes perfect sense. I mean, like if you're going on a journey, it kind of helps to know the destination.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
Exactly.
so.
And what I tell people is like, you can just start it and see what it ends up being. You don't have to be super type A and write everything down exactly what it has to be. You could also grab, your commonplace book as a starter kit and say like, start this way. I think we mentioned this, but you do have definitions of some of the great ideas. And I think those alone are worth picking this up, because they'll help you with that great ideas, but it shows you what to be looking for in the book. And then let's say you're assigned a book, you're a student, you're assigned a book, and you're like, I don't want to read this, but maybe I can go and find adoption in here. I don't have any entries on that. Let's go see. Let's see if that's there. Let me see if there are any good ideas. If there aren't, and I didn't find them, then that's part of the criticism of the book.
Mm-hmm.
That's so helpful,
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that with humility too, though, I would say sometimes we don't always see what's there. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So like it just depends, right? But I think you're right that like a book that's devoid of these great ideas is just not a good book.
Yeah.
But I'll give you just a good example. I wrote something. In part of my curriculum developed. I wrote a text on the creeds of Christendom, and then wrote the study guide for my own work, which was a little weird for me. It was funny because so in my study guides, I always list on each lesson any great ideas, virtues, or vices that show up in the text, right? And it was as I was reading my own text to make the study guide, I was struggling to find the great ideas in them, and I'm like, that's not great, and but I went ahead and I brought it to my students, and I had an 8th grade girl who is annotating the text as we've taught them to do, and finding, and she's writing down all these great ideas that she sees that I didn't see. It's like, 'cause I was blind to my own kind of like, I was standing close to my own tree or something like that, couldn't see the forest or something, and but she nailed it. And when I looked at hers, as I was grading her stuff, I went back and modified for next year. I modified the study guide a bit, because I'm like, no, she's totally right. That's absolutely there, and I just didn't see it. And so that's just the only thing I would want to say too is sometimes there are various reasons, either because you're new to looking for great ideas or something like that, where you might not see it, but reading in a book club or reading with other people together, they might be able to like help you see that theme or idea is really there, and you just it's just going over your head or something like that. So yeah, I
think that's huge. And if you didn't have any categories to judge it by, you wouldn't know. But if you have these great ideas, you say, look, I didn't find any, and someone else says, look at all the ones that I found. You go, oh, I missed it because maybe I'm not trained for looking at these, or maybe that one great idea just always eludes me. Why is that? Well, now you have some interesting things to work through in your own life as well, which is cool.
Yeah, and there's always a median, because like there's the person who can't find any, and there's the person that finds them on every single line.
In the cookbooks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's the Jordan Peterson.
A demon under every rock, or there's a great idea under every.
Yeah, huge, big time. Can I run through the rest of these differentiate with you? Would you be interested in that? I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Go ahead.
So the second one is purpose, And I have two different ways of keeping a commonplace book. One is a treasury and one is a manuscript. And the manuscript actually comes from me studying these and how I was using them. When I first started writing commonplace books, I didn't know that was a thing. I was an autodidact, I was preparing to go to seminary and stuff. And I saw these really good speakers and philosophers, popular philosophers, who could just pull quotes out of nowhere. And I'm like, how are they doing that? And I'm like, I bet that they're writing those down. I'm going to start a notebook of quotes so that I can, start memorizing these as well and be like that. I found out that that's what the ancient rhetoricians were doing too. But then I started writing blog posts and I was like, well, let me just get my thoughts out down here. So I put a quote, then my thoughts on the quote, and then the next quote. And I was manuscripting out the whole blog post right there, and came to discover that this is a actual distinction in the literature between what's called a printed commonplace book, ones that are collected and distributed. They're sold. Like this is let's see, I have W.H. Auden's commonplace book here. This is a printed commonplace book. It's not, you don't find his marginalia or anything, but if you had his notebook, you would, because that's more manuscript. So the purpose of the commonplace book, whether it's just a collection of quotes for you to pull from later or to memorize or to ruminate on, that's going to be a treasury. You're just storing them away. And then the manuscript one is like you're doing exegesis right there in the text. You're giving your own thoughts. You're manuscripting out an idea or an argument. And so you're actively utilizing them. And I found if you have that distinction, it's also super helpful. And I keep both. I keep all different kinds of commonplace books, but I wonder if do you ever write? So it sounds like yours is also a treasury. This is a storehouse. This is a collection for your quotes. You're going to use them later, but this is the collection of the quotations. Oh, you're muted here, Jacob. Oh, you're muted. Do you hear me? Yeah, there you go. Maybe your headphones died. Let's see. There we go.
Okay, hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So yeah, in classical schools, we teach in composition and rhetoric. We teach something called the progymnasmata.
Can you say that again?
Progymnasmata,
Nice.
right? Big
Okay.
old long Greek word. And if you break it down, you can probably see things like so. Pro is like meaning in this case would mean like kind of before,
Yeah.
okay? And then gymnas like it's like gymnasium, right?
Oh,
like,
okay. Gymnast. Yeah.
Okay, so these are the before exercises. These are the exercises you do going into formal rhetoric, right? And so what they are is a whole series of composition and or speaking exercises that teach you different elements of composition and rhetoric. And so, like for instance, there's the Crea, where you take a great quote and you find the wisdom of the quote and you magnify it, and you got to go through this whole process with it. Or there's also proverb and maxim, which does something pretty similar to Crea. There is imitation, where you take a person. So maybe you want to say, okay, I'm going to write a short essay, but I'm not going to write it like I would write it. I'm going to try to write it in the voice of C.S. Lewis. Yeah. I'm going to try to write it in how like Nietzsche would write it. I'm going to try, so you kind of become so familiar. You try to become so familiar with certain writers and approaches, and even their diction and things like that you can kind of mimic it.
Yeah, we did that in I did that for Kevin Van Hooser's class, where you had a dialogue between two theologians, and I actually I picked him and Carl F.H. Henry, which was kind of wild. But yeah, it's like that. I'm writing in their voice, but also with their own ideas, trying to put them forward, showing that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, if you've ever read any Peter Kraft, like he's done, he's done like kind of these dialogues between. He always kind of brings Socrates back from the grave, to do these dialogues with more modern people. And anyway, so he's doing the same kind of thing. So and on my Substack, if anybody's interested, like I have a list of the progymnasmata and exercises and examples and stuff like that.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down to link it.
Cool.
I mean, I'm super interested in this. Yeah, this is great.
But they're basically just the way I talk about it, I tell people, modern writing curriculums teach you like how to write a thesis and how to, like just like a few, like a research paper. And that's kind of like most of modern writing. And so that's like going to the gym and like just like working out like one arm, right?
Mm.
And like I don't know, have you ever seen Lady in the Water? Did you ever see that
No,
movie?
I don't think so.
It's stupid. It's so ridiculous. Okay, but in that movie, there's this one guy that's all takes place in a. It's another M Night Shyamalan movie.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
all
I
takes
know it. Yeah,
place
I've heard of that. Yeah.
in this like apartment or whatever. And but there's this one guy. That's all he does. Is he just works out one arm, and so he's got this like this beefy arm. The rest of him is just frail,
Mm.
skinny. It's just stupid, you know. But that's what modern writing curriculum is often like, is it teaches you just how to do one or two things, and that's the whole bread and butter, you know. And the program in Osmond, I was like, no, we're going to exercise every muscle in the writing body, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And it's not that you'll use all these all the time, but it's that you'll be ready to use them at any time, right?
Yeah.
And so it really helps people become uh, just more interesting writers, you know, just more in, I don't know, it's just, it keeps them from being flat like so much of modern writing is today, you know?
Yeah. Dude, that's fantastic to hear. Right now, there's kind of a big trend in academic spaces, probably on Substack, definitely on YouTube, of people just copying down the first line of their favorite book or something like that, so that somehow I'll get that in me and I will also be able to write like that. And that's cool. I think that's probably fine. It's a little bit non-cognitive in my book. Like just going through the pattern won't do it, I don't think. But
Right.
imitating them, writing as if you were them, yeah, sure, you can write down the cadence and stuff like that. But I don't. That seems so not cognitive. Like sure it's embodied or whatever, but I love what you just said where you're writing as them. I forgot that we did this in Van Hooser's class, but that will help you write like they did. Don't imitate, don't keep doing that, but be able to write like them. And you can probably find your own voice that way. You can learn why they
Yeah.
picked different things. I love that
Well, this is
idea.
how we find our voice, by the way. Like,
Mm,
so by reading the great books widely, and so reading texts that talk about the same ideas, but talk about them differently and even
yeah.
disagree with each other, you know.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
what it does is it's like thesis, antithesis, and you're the synthesis where you're like, this is what I think about that.
Sure.
I'm not trying to use as Hegel that does that. I can't
Yep.
remember, but like I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
using the same way as
Now we're
modern
all
philosophy. I'm
Hegelians.
just saying, yeah,
Yeah.
you're finding your own thoughts in the midst of all of that.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that. Another one that this isn't super important nowadays, I guess, but the third differentia is audience. And so is this for public use or is it for private use? If it's for most of us are private use people where I'm using this to write my papers, I'm using this blah blah blah. People used to print these up and sell them, and that was pretty cool. I'm doing that on Substack now because I realized I'm not keeping one of these. So I'm publishing my pocket proverbs book of wise sayings, sententiae, and I'm calling it Sages of the Sayings of the Sages. I always use sage somewhere in my stuff. That's cool. I really like doing that. Most people aren't going to do that, but you may consider keeping a commonplace book, a public one, a treasury commonplace book for your family. That here's for my kids. Here's all the cool sayings,
yeah,
and I tagged them for you. But here's Daddy's commonplace book. I'm giving this to you. This is 50 years of me reading.
yeah,
She passes that down to her kids. Like this is great grandfather's commonplace book. This is our family commonplace book. I think that would be a
yeah,
really cool thing to do.
yeah. That's a beautiful idea. Yeah,
Um, yeah,
I don't know. We have Mortimer Adler's Syntopicon, right? But he actually published. I'm not sure when, maybe in the '70s, but like the Treasury of Western Thought, which
yeah,
basically takes his own tag, so to speak, for the great ideas, and it does just this. Like it's
mm,
it was huge when I found that book. That really helped me out a lot as I was writing my dissertation because it did exactly the same thing that we've designed this commonplace to do, and it allows you to be like, okay, that's So the Synopticon will tell you kind of broadly, like, well, on these pages, like in the Great Book set, but this was nice because it kind of brought it to the forefront and actually gave you snippets of the quotes and stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah, and I love that. I think that's a distinction that I make between a compendium and a commonplace book. Compendium is like a field guide to birds or frogs or reptiles. There's not
Mhm.
quotes from a bunch of different uh, biology textbooks. It's just the facts. It's just here's this frog, here's where it lives. This is a compendium of this information. An encyclopedia is like the most massive compendium ever, and it's preposterous to even make them. I think I love them, but like this is all of our wisdom. This compendium on everything we know. Like, good luck with that. And then the Commonplace book is the quotes for different purposes. And so I love that. Like they work in tandem. And so I tell people to make both. People are like, man,
Yeah.
this is a lot of work. I'm like, working on your mind, working on yourself as a writer, as a thinker, that's a lot of work. Yeah. Yeah. But you have
Yeah.
other hobbies that suck. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, this makes me think of, at the upcoming Repairing the Ruins conference, is just in a couple weeks here in
Mhm.
Dallas. I'm getting to speak briefly on the idea of medieval disputations,
Yeah.
which is part of this the scholastic method, right? Like, so when you read Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologica, like that's what he's doing. He's doing this kind of scholastic disputation approach. But what a summa is an attempt to like perfectly master and categorize all human understanding on a
Yeah.
certain idea or certain subject. So Summa Theologica is an attempt, and it's a pretty gosh darn good one. Like, of trying to say this is Christian theology.
Yeah.
These are all the things that we think about, and then it breaks them down subcategory, and then debates them out on this kind of disputative front. And but I just think that's when you're talking about like the effort of writing these things out, like this is one of the things that stinks about the modern world, that we have all this access, we have this Googleability of finding things, and so nobody does anything for themselves, right? They think like, I don't need to know that because it's there for me. And this goes all the way back actually to Plato, who actually Socrates, I should say. Socrates didn't like the writing of books.
Right.
He's like, because people, if they write it down, they'll feel like they don't have to know it. They don't have to remember it, And there's, I mean, obviously we love books, right? But there's truth in what he's saying, and you see this in small ways in different places. Like if you're old enough to remember a time before cell phones became a major thing, right? You used to have like 30 or 40 of your friends' numbers memorized in your head, right? And how many of your friends' phone numbers do you actually know right now?
Yeah.
You don't know any of them, probably, right?
I'm still trying to learn my wife's. Yeah, because if my phone goes dead, I need to be able to call her. Yeah.
So there is this real thing where this dependency on technology, or the kind of immediacy and availability of information, actually makes us disdain it. We don't value it. And so you could say, well, there's already these encyclopedias of information available all over the place, right? Why would I ever bother to write something like that? Because if you write something like that or attempt to, it'll do incredible things to you, right? Like, and that's the point. And again, it's just this utility versus like formation. Education is first and foremost, it should be about formation of character and soul. That has much utility. It will inevitably have much utility, but the modern educational mindset of everything is utility is the kind of thing. Well, you don't need to do that because it's already done, and you can just kind of grab it whenever you want to, and so on and so forth.
Well, yeah, it makes you a type of person that is worth being. But also, what I think people miss here is that first, if you're making a personal compendium for yourself, this is the information that you care about. This is yours.
Yeah.
So you don't have to drag an encyclopedia around with you. Secondly, I think people miss this when they read the Bible as well. In any translation or any, transmission and translation of one text into another language, they're going to make choices. So why would I learn Greek and Hebrew if it's already translated? Well, which translation are you reading? You can find out why they picked that word instead of that word. You can figure out their translation styles, and you can read multiple and do this, or you can also read Greek and Hebrew, and that works as well. But the same thing goes for encyclopedias. They're making choices in what they've included and what they've excluded. Just because someone says this is an encyclopedia doesn't mean it's the summary of all human. Someone wrote that. So go and make your own and read. There's multiple encyclopedias. You can make your own and make your own choices, Adler style, and compare and contrast. Like that's
William of Ockham wrote, a Summa on logic, and he's wrong about so many important things. I mean, he's brilliant. Like, I'm going to give full credit. Like, he's a brilliant man, and I think he was, insofar as I understand him, I think he was a God-fearing, pious man. Even, so I respect him as a brother and all that kind of stuff. But he's like one of the worst things that ever happened to philosophy. So if you just sit back. And you're like, well, that's already done, so there's no point in engaging or doing it again, or either like, well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, we are all humans engaging in this process and bringing our perspective and bringing our faults and our geniuses and things like that to it. So
Well, and the worst case of this, of course, is generative AI, where someone says, "I asked ChatGPT this," and they're doing it unironically. I thought it was a
yeah.
joke when people were first doing it, but it's like, do you know that that thing's not infallible? And that was, uh, yes, it has been trained in certain ways without a human in the loop, which is actually more scary to me. But there are choices that have been made for curating what it's going to say, and you're acting
Hmm.
as if it's God. You're acting as if it's omniscient, and it only tells truth. But when you do that's so uncritical and crazy to me.
Yeah.
It's just so
Yeah.
bonkers. Um, with the Summa thing, actually, I did want to note this. We did disputations in a couple of my classes where you had to come to class with a disputation to dispute, and it was
Mhm.
great. It was a good time. I love what you said about the Summa. I studied systematic theology, and you can see over time it goes from a lengthic theology and Summa Theologica to an introduction to the Christian faith, because
Mhm.
people are like, dude, what do you mean Summa? I can't give you everything. So you still
I
have
got
these
time
huge
for
thick
that.
textbooks, but now it's just an introduction to the Christian. It's an overview, because they're recognizing, man, there's so much that I can't even touch on here in this book. And I'm just hedging my bets saying it's intro instead of a Summa, which I think is hilarious.
Right.
Jacob, one last differential I wanted to just kind of broach. It's just places. So common places from Aristotle. These were just like the headings of the different arguments, and then they became the tags for different quotations after Cicero and all those Roman rhetoricians and stuff, and probably Quintilian mostly. But then today people have kind of forgotten about places and the common places, the tags, which actually make the commonplace book a commonplace book. And so I've said, look, if you have a topic specific commonplace book, you may not need the tags. You're going to thumb through it and stuff like that, depending on the size of it as well.
Yeah.
But when it comes to making tags, I found a couple different ways. You give these optional tags like, hey, do the great ideas. I
Yeah.
just randomly thought of that like 6 months ago. I was looking over here and I was like, oh, the Syntopicon could be a source for these. Then I was looking through your stuff and saw you already did this and was like, no, he beat me to it. That's so perfect. Um, so I think that's one way to do it. I came up with 3 ways to find your tags. So you can keep them categorized or uncategorized. If you're going to categorize your commonplace books, there's 3 ways you could do it. Ad hoc is just adding the tag as you go. I found this quote, and the one before it also kind of touches on the same thing. So I'm going to just make a tag for this. I'll say mercy or something, and now that becomes one of my tags, and I'll try and keep that going as I go, kind of ad hoc, as you need, as you go. And then there's post hoc ones. Maybe you fill up your whole commonplace book with
Mm.
quotations you like, and now you can read back through and say, what do I have in here? Oh,
Mhm.
here's some of the tags that I'm
Why
finding
did I value
emerging.
that? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And then there's anti-hoc, which would be like you make the tags first. What am I actually looking for? What do I want to find in these books? If you're keeping a topic specific one on the philosophy of mind, because you're about to take a philosophy of mind class, then you look through the syllabus and you say, here's the topics we're going to look at. So I'm going to make those my tags. And I think each one of those is helpful. Maybe the ad hoc is the least helpful, but those are a couple different ways of going about finding the tags that you want to use in the actual commonplaces in your commonplace book. What do you think about finding tags that way and stuff?
No, I think it's great. I mean, I think I like the idea of having, both like a general commonplace, like what I've been talking about, but also more specific to an area of study or an area of learning or something like that. That's pretty cool. I think that's almost like the next step in a sense. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So like,
Yeah, I do.
this, like the commonplace book that we've made is a great way to start this process, to
Yeah.
learn this process and begin thinking through that. But somebody who gets into especially like graduate school level and is like narrowing their field of study,
Yeah. Exactly.
that would be really awesome. Say, well, this one is specifically just on like these theological doctrines or on this philosophical area of pursuit, but this is purely on aesthetics or
Yeah.
something like that,
Yep.
and that'd be awesome. And it'd be really cool to fill up a whole shelf worth of like very specific commonplace approaches. So
Yeah.
I like that.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because this is after I've been doing this for like 14 years. So sometimes people see this and they're like, I just bought 10 notebooks and I'm starting, and I'm like, that may be overwhelming. You probably shouldn't do that. You should probably start with a general commonplace book that's a treasury. Like, start with your book, start with this. You don't know all the tags and stuff. That's fine. Why would you know those? Okay, but take it from someone who has been studying the great books. Here are some beneficial tags to help you, commonplaces to help you categorize the quotations, and maybe even will guide your reading. I need to go and I don't have anything on the Battle of Wits. Let me go and find a book that talks about that so I can get some quotes for my commonplace book. Not just to be a completist, but because that's a great idea that I want to think about. So man, I commend
I
your
think
work
that
here.
one thing to keep in mind too is, so there's always this battle between like generalist and like very specific, and so like we need specialists, like we need specialists to be specialists in all kinds of different areas, and so nothing I'm about to say is contra that, right? And yet there's a natural progression here. So like everybody ought to have a broadly liberal arts education to begin with, right? Before they become a specialist in anything. And so if we think about commonplacing in that way, it also makes sense that that's where your commonplace should start. Like you should read widely. You should read across genres, across historical periods. Like you should just read, right? Just try to understand the world and your place in it, and to gain perspective of things that you would never know or experience on your own if you hadn't, kind of gone there in the book or whatever. And we all need that. And so a general commonplace, like we've been talking about, is wonderful for that, right? But it is only natural that as you gain a footing in a particular area of study, that you can kind of launch from there to get more narrow in your study, right? But I think even no matter how specialized you get in any field, you will be better for the broad-based approach first, right? Because the truth of the matter is, nothing's more boring than listening to some biologist who literally knows nothing but biology. Right. But nothing is more interesting than a biologist who's a great biologist, who's like dropping Shakespeare quotes on you in the middle of it. You know what I mean? Like 100%. How fascinating is that? Right. I mean, and so we want people to be specialized. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not anti-utility, but what we're trying to show people is that we want people who can speak to their neighbors no matter what they do, There are halls of academia where professors can't hardly talk to each other because they're so narrowly focused. They have their own jargon, and they write journal articles read by 3 people, which is like them and the 2 reviewers before it got published, because it's just so laser focused that nobody even knows what they're talking about. And so we just want people to be more of a generalist first. And in my case, I admit I'm a generalist always. That's where that is my specialization, is to be a generalist, kind of, But we value and need true specialists. But they will be more effective, more engaging, more interesting. They will draw more people to their own area of study if they are first and foremost a generalist themselves. And I think if you look at the history of great minds, you will see, right? I mean, you will see Pascal was a mathematician, philosopher, theologian, right? You will see, Descartes, who wrote like Cartesian graphs. Like that's when you're doing math, you're doing Cartesian, like it's him, and he's also doing discourses on like metaphysics and things like that. You know what I mean? And so it's only in the modern age that we have like completely compartmentalized all of the disciplines and encourage people to just live in one. And that's a really huge negative. So,
well, it's the bastardization of that phrase, jack of all trades, master of one. You go, jack of all trades means master of none. Like, why? Why? Like, specialize in what? Like, exactly what you're saying. I think keeping a general commonplace book ought to be a motivation for you to read outside of your specialization, because I want to fill up this notebook. I want to, I want to collect these quotes, and it would be fun to be able to share those with people in a way that blesses them and doesn't put yourself up on a pedestal. No one hates that more. Like that's terrible to be like, look at the quote I found. But it's like, no, dude, I found this, let me share it with you in a way that's not like, look at how much I read,
Right.
Um,
Well, and again,
I mean,
another thing. So, like, I have it's basically somebody did a commonplace book of sorts, right? But it's the Quotable Lewis. I don't know if you've ever
yeah,
seen that book.
Jerry Root discipled me for 5 years. That's one of the quintessential commonplace books I use on ParkNotes to say, here's what here's what a specific commonplace book looks like with tags. Like I can, categorize the whole thing. It's perfect.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that'd be a lot of fun. That'd be a fun project, frankly, to like take a specific author or thinker and write a general commonplace, but only in their world of thought.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So is it general or is it specific? That's going to depend on how you categorize it. It's specific
That's
to
right.
this one author, but it's about all of their ideas about these different things. And
And you
yeah,
could do that in so many different ways, right? You could like, and this would be really fast. It just popped in my head. It's really fascinating, right? But like you say, okay, I'm going to keep a commonplace book only on ideas about religion or something like that, right? But only as spoken through the mouth of scientists.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like you
yeah,
could kind of do stuff like that. You can
100%.
make interesting pairings, and just like, well, let's see what I can find if I just
Dude,
kind of put those parameters up front.
now you are speaking my language, man. I mean, I'm looking around my office. I have all these different, I've never thought of that one before. That's really fantastic. But let's say you're a Christian apologist who specializes in, um, the age of the earth and stuff like that, you should be keeping exactly what you're saying. Like you should have all these to say, hey, look, I've read all these other people.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't know the science and blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, he said this and he said this. I have it in a commonplace book. I've been meditating on it. Like I know what they actually say. I think just for anyone who wants to be an expert in a field, like you need to be doing this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
good
I mean,
one
you
though.
think about it, like no matter, reading is formative. Like any book, unless it's like your absolute favorite book that you've read like 1,000 times, right? Like any book you've read, and even ones you really value and like and remember fondly, like you can't generally like give a play-by-play of absolutely everything that happened in the book, right? Like so, it's formative to you. Like things, you believe things where you don't know where you got them from
Sure.
right now. Like you're
Yeah.
like, I went through the Play-Doh factory and came out this shape. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but by keeping a commonplace book, right, it will help kind of remind you sometimes, like, that's where I got that idea. I've been saying that, like I've been saying that to my friends or to anybody who will listen, maybe.
Mhm.
But that's right. Like that was in Paradise Lost that I first thought of that thing in that way.
Yeah.
And so it's just really great.
That's so cool, man. And it's a intellectual history for yourself. Here's where I've been. Here's
Yeah.
where I'd like to go. I don't see any quotes from this book. I should read that book, stuff like that. One last thing I'll mention that I get a lot of really cool things in the comments of ParkNotes, a lot of good ideas. The best idea I think I've had is to turn the notebook upside down and open it up in the back and start the index backwards. And for your book, you already have the common places, so you may not need to do this. If you're doing an ad hoc one, or if you're keeping a compendium and you don't know what you're going to be collecting yet, flipping it and starting backwards means that you're going to run into the actual content eventually. But one of the hardest things is trying to plan beforehand and say, this is exactly what it's going to be about. And if it's not, then I have to throw this away and get a new notebook. Some people are super
Yeah.
type A. Just start it, flip it, and reverse it. I won't do the Missy Elliott thing, but yeah, do that and then meet in the middle. You're probably not going to be in the middle. It's going to be all the way over here, but you've given yourself space to make a really good index to really find your stuff to help your intellectual life. That's what this whole thing's about anyways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think people need to feel both some freedom and
Yeah.
also look for some direction here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah. Little structure, but
just
freedom.
willy-nilly may not be really helpful to you. So finding some sort of system, at least initially, that maybe somebody else has proposed is a great place to start,
Yeah.
But you don't need to feel like locked into that. You don't need to feel
Totally.
locked into the one I'm suggesting or any, but as you grow in this process and mature in your own thoughts, like feel free to try a different thing, and feel free to create your own categories and tags and things like that. And in our commonplace book, we have a whole section in the back leaving room for you to add tags, because we want you to feel that freedom to be like, well, he didn't even think about this, but I see this in a lot of literature, and I want to have that in my burn, so we encourage the kind of expansive way of doing it,
Yeah.
and so yeah, find find an approach that at least kind of gets you grounded and directional,
Mhm.
and then do it for a while, and then think hard about it and add your own thoughts and grow and expand.
Yeah. That's awesome. So yeah, man, I commend this Study the Great Books Commonplace book. But I mean, I guess I can leave a link to it. Where can people find it once it's available here?
Yeah, so you could technically go look right now, although it's still not quite ready, but studythegreatbooks.com. It's up, but we're not ready for sales, and it'll probably be the third week in June that I think we should be ready to start taking sales.
Awesome.
So feel free to look around, but don't, if you add something to your cart, there's not really anything to buy technically yet. So, I wouldn't want anybody to be confused. But yeah, you can go there, or we're also stgb.substack.com. And in both locations, you're going to be able to find links and things like that to the store to buy the Commonplace book. And also, we've got one of the things you'll like this too. I'll just do a real quick plug.
Yeah.
So this is our first print edition. I'm really excited about it. We got lots more to come. Right. This is Macbeth, and this is our new annotation edition series. And what is an annotation edition? It's just like a journaling Bible where you have extra marginal space with lines, right?
Yeah.
And that's the brilliance. That's the whole brilliance right there, right? It's just more room to write your thoughts and notes and things like that. And so the way the Study the Great Books setup works is really we think of our annotation editions, our study guides, and the Commonplace book as like kind of this kind of triad that work together to just dig and dig and dig into great books. And so that's the goal.
I love it, man. I'm a huge marginalia guy. I'm obsessed with it. I beat the crap out of my books because they're mine, and I write. That's why I read. That's partially why I read. So I love that idea. I actually love the guide idea because I don't always love those journaling notes on the side, but it gives you a lot of people really like those. But it gives you the permission to write. Sometimes you think, well, I don't know, I kind of paid a lot for this book or whatever. Like, the whole purpose of this one is for you to annotate it. You are free to do so. Yes, give yourself permission and just go do it, because it's going to help you study the great books better. It's going to help you make those ideas your own. So
yeah, I'm a firm believer if you're not writing in your books, you're not even entirely reading that book. So that's just my opinion.
I love that. I love that. You're going to get me in trouble again, man. Yeah, that's funny. This is awesome. Jacob, thanks so much for coming on the pod, man. This has been huge.
This has been awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Again, guys, you can find all those links in the description. That's going to do it for now. This has been Parker's Pensées, and as always, all glory to God.